All right. Here we
Wow.
go.
Okay.
Hi everybody, it's Marcus Collins, and actually here in person this evening we have Wenjin. So we're here to give you a presentation on smart strategies to succeed in today's competitive housing market.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us what we're going to talk about tonight, Wenjin?
Well, we're going to talk about some of the decisions that you will make during your buying process. And we're going to go through a little bit detail in the purchasing process and how you make smart decisions when you buy and how you search for homes, and then go into the offer process.
The details of the offer process.
Offer process.
So
Very detailed, yes.
Right, so if you want details, tonight we have details all about that buying process. So why don't we kick off with a little bit, because what everybody really wants to understand is what's the market like.
Yes.
So why don't we talk a little bit about smart decisions and specifically the local real estate market. So this evening, going to cover Lexington. We have a lot of information on our website for an array of different towns, probably about 40 different towns. So there's lots of information on our website. But tonight I'm going to focus on Lexington, but I'm going to give it within the context of the kind of the bigger COVID recession kind of framework. So not just about Lexington, there's kind of much more to it than just Lexington. So headline numbers for Lexington, about a 66% rise since the prior peak in 2005. So there was a small crash here, went from 725, the median, to 650. Then it has come up again now, and at the end of 2019, we hit a median price of $1.2 million. Interesting to put that in in comparison to Arlington, for example, the next town in. The median price there about 800,000, and that has a lot of bearing. The juxtaposition of these two towns and the difference in price has a lot to explain for the dynamics that we're seeing in Lexington and Arlington. So we'll kind of talk about that in a few moments. But let's bury into the details a little bit, go into the details just a little. Here's the inventory level for Lexington for the last decade, and what this is a snapshot of how many homes are available to buy essentially on the first of the month. So first of the month I go out and say, how many homes are there on the market? Here's the numbers. So it's interesting, less in the actual numbers itself, but more in the kind of trend that we see. Two trends which are important. First one is, of course, this between 2012 and 2013. That's when we saw a marked drop in the inventory levels. That was caused by buyers coming essentially out of the woodwork saying, you know what, the recession is behind me. Now let's be forward thinking and now have confidence in the housing market. And lo and behold, into the housing market they came. So the amount of available inventory dropped from a peak of probably 200 down to almost 50%, just over 100 in that period. So that was kind of, to some respect, in some respects, ancient history, given what we've been through in the last few months. We did see an increase in inventory in that 2019, and this kind of much closer to home. And this will really begin to tell us how we anticipate the rest of 2020 into 21 playing out. So as you can see, there was a marked increase in the number of listings coming on the market of inventory. In terms of the sales, they've fallen since 2015, 273 existing house sales in 2018, and 265 existing home sales, just under 350 if you add everything in, new construction and so on. So relatively static. So what we're seeing here is that an increase in the number of listings, which in this graph is the orange line, but a static number of buyers, and that's what's caused that increase in the inventory, that more sellers are putting their home on the market, but there aren't enough buyers in the market to absorb all of that excess inventory. As such, the median price, single-family homes in Lexington, has essentially static. It rose slightly, but not by very much. And so what we're finding now is excess inventory and relatively static price appreciation. So that was the picture at the end of 2019, and it's worth thinking about, why is that? What's happening? What's the big drivers in the market before we talk about what the economic drivers in the market are? So if we look at demographics, that tells us a lot about Lexington type home, type towns, and Arlington type. So, 1.2 median versus 800,000 median. Well, how do those two kind of juxtaposition to each other? Here's the demographics for the US from 2015, actually. Hopefully we'll get some more updated numbers in the next couple of months, maybe, perhaps even 2021, probably by the time they kind of process this year's census. Two areas are interesting. So the length of those bars, blue are male, red is female, is how many people are in each age bracket. And there are two bumps in that which are worth looking at. There's the top one there, that's the baby boomers, the children born just after World War II, now getting to retirement, and from the housing market perspective, now getting to downsizing time. Time to move out of my 3,000 square foot home into my 1,500 square foot home. Mm-hmm. The lower bracket there, or the lower yellow bar, are the first-time home buyers, the so-called millennials. And when you think about an Arlington or a Somerville, Melrose, Medford, those towns are ideally situated to have the first-time home buyers move into them, close into Boston, great school systems in many cases, great lively town centre, so it kind of starts to tick the boxes for the first-time home buyers. For the downsizers, it works as well, because they think, I want to move into a town, for example, if I'm in Lexington, I'd like to move to Arlington because it's relatively close to where I am today. My circle of friends remains the same circle of friends. So I don't have to think about finding new friends if I was to move much, much further afield. So they're looking at that town thinking, close to where I am, more affordable than where I'm living, got a good school system for price appreciation, good access to Boston, begins to tick their boxes too. So why we're seeing, for example, the housing market in Arlington stronger than we see here in Lexington and Winchester and Belmont for that matter, is because we've got these two groups of buyers looking at that town very seriously. So that's the kind of big picture of why we're seeing what we're seeing. And some of the lack of sales, lack of listings that I showed you previously in the last couple of years, not so much, last 2019, is caused by the sellers, the downsizers, struggling to find their next home because they're having to compete with today's first-time home buyers. That's what's kind of going on. Mm-hmm. So that's, big picture, irrespective of the last 3 to 4 months. So I guess we should focus on the last 3 to 4 months a little bit, because that's kind of, upset it somewhat. Because we've gone from what was economic uncertainty, that's what we were talking about at the end of 2019 coming into 2020, all the way now into COVID certainty, kind of what's happening in the market. And the reason I went through the kind of big picture is, as you'll see in a minute, we're beginning to pull out of that COVID uncertainty, if you like, the what's happening because of COVID. And so many of the predictions we were making in early January look like they're about to come to pass as we kind of pull out of this. So what we were predicting in January is that we would see more sellers in the market because of that perception, if not the reality, of economic uncertainty, a static number of buyers in the market. And therefore, we saw the market tending more towards a balanced market, be very much a seller's market for a while. Now it was going to shift to a balanced market. With that economic uncertainty kicking in short term, we have an election coming up in November. Clearly, that's huge uncertainty in terms of how that will play out too. Mortgage interest rates we weren't worried about in January, still aren't for that matter. And so we saw price appreciation stalling and becoming static in that 2020 timeframe. So that's what we were predicting for 2020. That kind of got thrown on its head, of course, as we kicked into COVID. And the one thing we were looking at closely as COVID happened was the number of listings that were coming on the market, because we saw that as a great indicator of confidence in both the buyer's market and the seller's market. And so we were closely looking at, and I'll show you some data in a minute, that looks at the number of listings 2019 versus 2020. I would add a slight caveat to that, in that in January we were predicting we would get more listings in 2020 than we saw in 2019. But the comparison I've done is to kind of see if we're at parity. That has some implications for 2021, because as you'll see in a minute, we're approaching parity with 2019. What that means is there's a large number of sellers, a relatively large number of sellers, that are putting off selling until 2021. And that we'll have a better handle on that in the next few months. But it does seem to us that we're going to see more listings in 21 than we saw in 2020 with a static number of buyers.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at what back to normal means for Massachusetts. This is a number of testings, is grey. Orange bar is the number of confirmed cases. I did this up until the end of June. Clearly our numbers are going down. Our R number is below 1, which means it's not increasing. The number of confirmed cases is not increasing. So a positive picture. Clearly that's not the picture in the rest of the US, Arizona, Texas, California. We've heard lots about those states, but certainly in Massachusetts it does look like we are getting down to a relatively low number, perhaps similar shape of that graph that we see in Europe at the moment, which is kind of say very similar to what we have here. Similar, of course, to the number of deaths. I mean, that's on its way down. Clearly a really important, more important number. Given that kind of confidence that we're over the worst. We are, we clearly have a number of confirmed cases, but it's manageable. It's not growing today anyway. That brings some confidence into the market.
Right, it's a downward trend. So.
Fingers crossed on that one, and hopefully we have the political will in Massachusetts to keep it that way.
Keep that downward trend, continue. That's important.
So listings. Here's a comparison between 2019, which is blue, and 2020, which is orange color. As you can see, January and February about the same. It seems like a long time ago, but we actually had a mild winter it seems like ages ago actually, but there was a relatively mild winter. And as you can see from this graph, January, February, early March, about parity with 2019. It really kicked into the housing market, in the listing side anyway, in that mid-March. I split March into earlier, the two halves of March, first 2 weeks, second 2 weeks. That lack of inventory or lack of listings continued into April. And the big question we all had was, at what point will the sellers come back into the market? Really, at what point will the buyers come back into the market? Because the sellers will therefore react to that. And that was, we were, is it going to be May or is it going to be June? And I think the shape of the graph that I just showed you with the number of confirmed cases coming down quite steeply, meant that was in the early to mid-May time frame that the buyers came back into the market, and therefore so did the sellers. And as you can see, we're almost at parity in May. Now, as we've just got the data for June, we see more listings in June than we saw in June 2020 versus June 2019. So we are seeing lots of buyers in the market and lots of listings in the market. But still, I think you would agree, Wenjen, a competitive environment for today's buyers?
Yes, very competitive. A lot of us, I think people who were not planning to move, due to COVID in the city, now they are thinking about coming out. So it's becoming a very competitive market for here in Lexington and Arlington.
Right.
Area.
So one benefit of not living in the big city is that, we've got more space around us.
Yeah.
I guess that's true, yes, moving forward.
Yeah.
A different way to look at this, perhaps, is look at the cumulative. It gives you a sense of kind of where we are. Blue line is 2019, orange again is 2020. And as you can see, we're about at parity until mid-March. And at that point, we saw a flattening of the number of listings, and then back up it's coming. That flattening in week 27, I guess that is caused by July the 4th weekend. We have 4 homes coming on the market this week. I think other agents will bring them on too. So I think we'll be probably at parity with 2019 by the time we get to mid-July. So that's kind of where we are, hopefully.
I'm seeing a lot of new listings coming up for this weekend. So actually got buyers coming in to take a look at homes.
So you've got relocation buyers coming in?
Yes, this weekend. Yeah, we got people relocating here. Now they're more comfortable traveling now. So we'll see them coming up.
Because there was this thought, is, given that everybody's working from home, are the relocation buyers going to come in?
Yeah, I actually had 2 sets of relocation buyers. One already bought, and now there's another set coming up, ready to go. So that means, the confidence level is coming back.
Right.
Yep.
Cool. So what about the rest of 2020 for these listings? Just to kind of wrap up the graphs, if you will. So we were only about, he says, about 20 to 25 listings behind where we would be if we were compared to 2019. As I said before, we were predicting more homes coming on in 2020. I think that's unlikely. We'll have to wait till 2021 to see that many of those listings coming on. But we're only about 20 to 25 behind, and I think we'll probably soak up that lack of inventory in July and perhaps some of it in August. School system still matters, even though children may be studying from home for 2-3 days a week. Who knows? Apparently they're trying to decide quite how to do it here in Lexington. Quite how kids studying from home and parents working from home works, I actually don't know. I have no idea. One of the agents in our team has just put a house under agreement that has 6 bedrooms, which ordinarily would be a lot of bedrooms.
Yes.
But when you think about it, mum and dad get one, the 2 children get one, guest bedroom, 2 offices.
Yep.
So actually, it makes sense, I think.
Yeah, my buyers are changing their spec. They need more rooms.
More bedrooms, right? Because I think that's going to be a trend as we see people, and that's perhaps another reason people move out of the city, where reality is many of the condominiums are smaller.
Right.
They're going to come out looking for a bigger house with more rooms.
You can have 2 people working all in the dining room. That's not going to work.
Right. Yeah. You could do that for a few weeks, but given that more and more people are being told to work from home full time, or at least for an extended period anyway, as far as anybody can see, you're right. 2 people working in a dining room? Yeah. Okay for a couple of weeks, but after that it becomes not so much. Yeah. So looking at the kind of projection of this data, it does look like very quickly, certainly in Q4, but probably Q3 as well, we will get back to business as usual, with perhaps less listings coming on the market than we originally anticipated in 2020. So back to those predictions that we made in January, it will begin to happen, that will begin to kind of tend towards that more balanced market where we've got a comparable number of buyers and sellers. We're not quite there yet, but I think it will begin to happen, certainly as we get into the fall market. The big question for the future, of course, is this a U or a V-shaped recession? I think we know the answer now. In order for this to be a V-shaped recession, that we go in and we come straight back out, the employment numbers look okay, but it was pretty clear that in order for this to be a short, sharp recession, everything had to be right. We had to get everything right, and given that the U.S. economy is predominantly service-based, that's been hit very hard. It seems unlikely that we'll be out of this recession anytime soon. It does look like it will continue all the way through to 2021. That's for sure, I think. Especially if COVID has this resurgence in part of the US. Even though we think we're immune to that, I think in the bigger picture, we're clearly not. Somewhat, of course, but really not immune to it. So we will begin to see, we're already beginning to see, airlines saying it's not going to be as quick a recovery as they originally thought, beginning to furlough staff. Also, many businesses, yes, they'll be back, but they'll be back with less staff, I think. So we will begin to see something of this recession in 2020 and then continuing, and this is the U-shape, continuing into 2021 until we get the vaccine, whenever that happens, 2021, and then our economy kind of grows from there. Okay, I've talked enough.
Would you like some water? Have a sip of water.
So that's kind of the numbers, smart decisions. Now let's talk about smart process. So how do you approach that kind of now I'm looking for a home. As a buyer, I'm looking for a home, and the first thing I guess we should focus on is what exactly am I looking for, and what's important for today's buyers. So why don't you take us through that, Wenjin?
Okay, are you gonna do the slide?
You can do that. Press that button there. Press that button there.
Should I just go to the next slide?
Go for it.
Okay. Well, actually, before we jump ahead, I think it's important just to share my background. I have moved 11 times roughly in about 20 some years.
Right, every
I
2
won't
years.
give away my age. I started moving when I was very young.
We're all thinking we don't want Wayne
Yeah.
Gentle to move in 2 years' time.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So no, I'm here to stay. I'm done moving. But I think for every move, there's always a reason why. It's
Sure.
very important. So when I talk to my buyers, why are you moving? You know, to understand what's the purpose. And many of them are, you know, because I want to find a newer and, you know, better home. Or I need to, you know, for young people, they want to establish their own household. So they need to buy, which are the first-time home buyers. And also people who have increasing family size, you know, extra children and more children, so you gotta get a bigger house.
Right.
And or downsizers, right?
Yep.
People who want to move out, like you said. And also a lot of them are job transfers. Statistically, you know, in US, there are 36% people that are moving due to jobs. I Googled that yesterday.
36%.
Yes.
I wonder what it is in 2020.
Yeah, you know, so that
But I
may
mean, your
change.
experience with people relocating, that I mean, it's not zero this year.
No, it's not
That's for
zero
sure.
this year. Right,
Right.
right. So that's the reason, you know, like understand why, and then we go from there. And then what's important, because based on why, then you can decide what's important, right? So let me see if I can make this work.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, so what's important? So for a lot of people, you know, it comes down to about 3 major categories, right? You know, in terms of commute, you know, where's the work and where do I live? How do I get to work? If I'm living near Boston, how do I get into work? And Boston, you know, the traffic is getting worse by the day, but has been really great.
No, I was going to say, apart from the last month or the last 2
Yeah, but I'm
months.
start seeing some red lines, you know, on the Google Maps. So, you know,
Right.
it start kind of coming back now.
I've noticed that too.
Right. So the commute is something that to be considered. Okay, and there are several ways in terms of commute. You can drive in, or you can take, you know, public transportation. And how much do you want to be on the train, you know, commuter rail? It can be an hour, or it could be half an hour, etc.
Right.
So something to think about. And then another one is schools. You know, what for a lot of people that have children, very concerned about, you know, getting into good school system and a strong school system. And some that, especially some of the downsizers, they really don't care about school systems.
Right.
Okay, and that's good. But something to think about is a good school district can actually hold up your property value as well.
And I think what you were saying about relocation. I know when Danny and I moved up here from Maryland, the school system is organised at the county level. So imagine Montgomery County, with where we were in, was probably 1 million people.
Yeah.
There were 20 high schools. Where what we found interesting when we came up to Massachusetts, everything is done at the town level.
Yes.
So now you can have 2 towns that are next to each other, one with a good school system, one with a school system which is rising.
Right.
That kind of surprised us. We need to think about which town,
Right.
because we're interested in the school system.
Right. So I think we all know that real estate is very local, you know, regional, localized. So what you know of in other states may not apply the same here.
Right. And certainly school system is one of the pros.
Here. So school system, in particular here in Massachusetts, is, you know, like you said, is by town. So it's important to kind of understand how important that is for you, for the people, my buyers actually. Okay, and affordability, meaning that really is how much budget you have and what kind of home that you can get in the town that you want to be in, and based on the commute. So my buyers in general, you know, 3 out of this of these 3 important group of consideration, they sometimes have to let go of one or the other.
I can't have all 3.
Yeah.
No, I guess I can't, can I?
Yes, well,
no,
you know,
great commute, great school system, and really affordable.
well, yes.
No,
Okay,
you can't get
that's,
that.
you know, you just have to kind of give out one or the other. So, so that comes to be, you know, the conversation of really, you know, what are your needs? You know, what are your wants? Like I always say to my children, you know, really, how, you know, you gotta know exactly what do you need, like what you must have. You gotta write that down. Okay, you know, if a commute is, if you have 2 people working, you know, in a household, you know, how is the commute gonna be managed by both of you? So that's important to consider the commute, how to go, and also, you know, the school system. And other than that is, you know, how many bedrooms do you need? You know, bathrooms, is garage a must? For someone coming from Mid-Atlantic, garage is a must here because, you know, the winter is it's just horrible. How can I live without garage, right?
Right.
In a snow town, I gotta have garage. So to them, at least one garage is very important, right? Okay. And so that's kind of all the must-have you kind of have to write down. This is something that I gotta have, you know, and go from there. And there are many things that are nice to have. I love to have 8 bedrooms, one for each person, and everybody gets one extra office. So these are some of the wish list, you know, and I want to have an acre lot. Okay, you probably don't get that in Somerville or here in Cambridge. You probably get that all the way out by Framingham, maybe.
Certainly
maybe.
Westford, yeah.
Westford,
Harvard,
and which when you go over there, it's about an hour or hour and a half commute to the city. So kind of have to balance which one that's more important to you and to the family. Okay, and it's important that when you set up the needs, the must-have, and the wants, that you involve people who are making the decision together. That you immediate your spouse or your partners or immediate family members, and also that people who are going to help you with financially.
I guess which is important to first-time home buyers.
Yeah, especially for the first-time home buyer, is mom and dad or Uncle Joe is coming and say, hey, I'm going to help you.
Right.
That's important to get their feedback about what are some of the areas that you want to buy in. That's important.
Yep.
Okay. So, all right. So then, after that conversation, it's very important to know your budget. How much do you have that you can buy? And what I always recommend is that talk to a financial lender, a mortgage lender. Get a pre-approval letter. And that pre-approval is very easy to get. It's quick, and you don't have to get the loan from them, from the lender, but it will at least tell you, based on your income, your expenses, your loan, how much you can afford the home for. Right? So you kind of know your limit before you go out shopping. Okay, and what I found that in the last few months, during this COVID-19, because of all the restrictions, more and more sellers are asking before you even show the home that you give them a pre-approval letter.
Yeah, I had that with one case as well.
Yeah. And what that really is shows to the seller that we are serious buyers, that we have done our homework, we know what our budget is, we really want to buy, and here's what we are able to afford, that price level.
So do it early, don't delay.
Yeah, do it early now. And I think I want to bring that up is that buying a home is a very emotional process. It's a very complicated process. So it's important that you have a team of people, professionals, kind of, to support you, and it will help you to know kind of how much you can afford by talking to the lender. Sure. Right.
Yep.
So
I guess you don't have to, if you can afford $3 million, you don't have to buy a house valued at that.
That is right. Well,
you can always bring that back.
Right. But at least you know how much you can afford, and then you can then go shop around and based on your budget.
Right.
And that's important. Yeah. And so here you talk about the difference between pre-approval and pre-qualification. When I talk to the lender, pre-qualification is something that's very simple. You just kind of fill out online and based on the information that you provide. Okay, but pre-approval comes, with a lot more confidence level, if you will, because you have to submit a certain level of paper to the lender, and then taxes, they give you I think the sellers like to see a pre-approval letter, because that shows that you have gone through a certain level of process. Okay, so that's kind of what the difference between the two. Okay, and so establish a budget, we talk about that. Yeah, exactly, we went through that. Once you know what you are able to afford, then you can decide how much you want to spend. You don't have to spend everything that you're pre-approved for, right? Yep. You can just kind of decide what you want to do. Okay, and once you have the offer accepted, you can then shop around for a better rate. You don't have to use the lender who gave you the pre-approval letter. And we have lenders that we work with that will be very happy to just give you a pre-approval letter quickly, and no obligation to buy from them.
Right.
Okay. All right. And consider cost of owning and renting. I had that conversation with mostly with the first-time home buyers. Okay. And it's like it's sometimes it's quite I would say how should I say this? Overwhelming to think about owning a home when you're a first-time home buyer. So much better I just rent. I don't want to commit. But if you're thinking about long term, I will share with my buyers that you're paying the rent to yourself. Really,
you're paying the landlord's
the
mortgage. Is another way to think of
you're
it.
paying the rent to yourself.
Right.
Because if you take out the mortgage, if you're able to do that, so it's a smart investment strategy. To build your equity. So that's what I would say. I keep forgetting that I need to push this.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can't do it. I wish you could do it just thinking it would jump
Yeah,
forward.
I'm like, I'm trying to tell it.
Move forward.
Yeah, move forward.
There you
I
go.
have to keep pushing it.
Not quite there yet.
So, what is the role of the buyer's agent? So, I want to say that buyer agent works for you, but most importantly, think about. I mentioned before that buying is a very complicated process. Not only for the first-time home buyer, but for people who've done it before. Now think about it. On average, I think we would be in a place. This is also another statistics that we are in a place 7 years. Usually, 7 to 10 years before we change our home.
Except you move every couple of years, right?
Yeah, but I'm done now. Yeah, I'm done now. So that you may have forgotten what the process was like, or it may have been different because there's different requirements, legal requirements. So it's important to find someone, a buyer's agent, professional, who are able to kind of help you and support you and share the wisdom with you. And it's just like if you let's say if you are an athlete, you go find a coach who kind of help you. And so this is kind of building a team for yourself as you're going through this very big investment process. Is first find the buyer's agent, and we talk about other people you need on the team later. But buyer's agent is one of, I always consider myself as a role as an advisor, a counsel, and someone who share with you the experiences, not only myself, but also with all my other buyers, my clients, and kind of give you some of the advices along the way. Okay, I think that's important. And also share with you about the local market. We talk about real estate is very local. So what's happening in the town here and in a couple of next town that we work in. So we kind of understand what is going on in the market today. Okay?
As we showed at the beginning, there's a big difference between two towns which are right next door to each other, Lexington and Arlington. The housing stock is more expensive in Lexington because of historical reasons.
Right.
But you kind of need to know how those two, first of all, relate to each other or interrelate to each other to get a sense of what's going on in each of those markets.
Exactly. And then in the area that I often have buyers, Weston, all the way out in Weston is different market than what you would see in Cambridge or Somerville, or all the way up north to Melrose. Up north is not that north, but
Melrose is not that far.
Not that far.
Further north than that.
So if you just look at in the vicinity of this, within this 10 miles, 20 miles, every town is different. So you're gonna need to have agents who's worked in those towns and have the good knowledge. And for us, we have the advantage because we also have the data to help you, to kind of educate you, what are the strength of each market, and that's important. That's why my buyers, my clients, actually all turn into my friends, finding very useful when I'm able to share that with them. Okay, and then once once you get through that process of finding home, we help you manage your offers. There's so much. After you submit the offers, that whole process, you gotta go through the offer, the inspection,
6 to 8 weeks
worth. 6
worth
to 8
of
weeks worth of time at least, and all the way to closing, And the key really is to have a buyer's agent who can help you get to the closing table successfully. Okay, and have someone who is able to negotiate for you, to be on the lookout for you and to be able to communicate successfully to the other co-broke, like the seller's agent. That's very important. So let's see here. I think, and the key is there's no cost to you. The sellers sign a contract with with the agent, and that they will pay the commission for for the co-broke and the listing agent. So there's no cost to the buyer. So and so the important thing remember is to get a professional buyer's agent to work for you. Okay, to be on your team.
and a team around you, right?
Yeah, very important.
I love the way you say that.
Okay, so I still have to push this. Okay, so now listing agent. Listing agent works for sellers. Okay, I have been a listing agent myself. So during that time I work for my seller. The goal is I already signed a contract with the sellers, for example, and so whatever the listing agent to do is to get the best price for their sellers, get the best terms and conditions for the seller. So they are on solely, duties to the sellers.
Right. That sounds like it's directly opposed with getting the best price, terms and conditions for the buyer. They don't seem to be aligned, those two things, do they?
It's like you look at the hand, it's the opposite, and you can't get them all on the same side, right? So you got the seller this side, the buyer this side.
Right.
So if I'm the agent who's working for my sellers, I cannot work for you. If you come to me, ask me to buy to help you buy a house, then I'm gonna try to think what's the best for the sellers, right? So I have met buyers who thinking, oh, I can buy through the listing agent. I don't have to pay commission, okay? But actually, you don't have to pay anyway, because the sellers are paying it. And it's truly the seller's agent. They don't really understand what your needs are. Like I stay with my clients, from the beginning to the closing, so I understand what their needs are as we were going through the searching process, and kind of know what they're looking for.
Right.
So, and able to negotiate for them based on not only the dollar. I think a lot of times not just the price you pay, but the terms and conditions that you put in as you negotiate. Okay, and then so remember, when you're thinking about going to talk to the listing agent, think about the hand. The one hand cannot negotiate with each other. The seller's agent always works for the seller. Right.
And I think the way you put it before, if you work with the listing agent, we recommend you don't. It's a transaction.
Yes.
It is literally just a transaction.
Right.
Whereas, as you described, the buyer agent and your role as a buyer's agent with the buyer, part of that team, that trusted advisor, understand deeply what they want. Yes, does this make sense? And does it not make sense?
Right.
You can kind of advise them, whereas the listing agent sees it just as simply a transaction.
It is a transaction because their duty is to their sellers to get their seller, the best price in terms and conditions. So that's important to remember. Okay, so now let me push that again. Ooh, dynamic duo. So
there we are, a dynamic duo.
A dynamic duo. Right. So like I mentioned before, buying a home is the biggest investment in your life, and you may have done it once, maybe the first time. So it's important that you have someone here to stand next to you, and to be, also to be on the lookout behind your back to support you, right? So you need an agent who understands the market, a professional agent. I mean, we have some part-time agents who really don't know what's going on. They maybe come out, once every few months, to make a transaction. But you need an agent who are, constantly be on top of what's going on, the dynamic of the market, and understand the market and seeing the homes, can able to help you to evaluate this property. Is it, what should be the fair market value for this home, and able to negotiate with you and for you, and help you guide through the contract, the home inspection process, and have especially the ability and the skills to solve a lot of problems along the way. Okay, right. It's a process. A process is going to have some bumps along the way, like a road. There's no road that without pebbles or potholes. Right.
Yep.
So it's important to have agents who have experienced the problems before from other transactions, and able to bring that experience to say, okay, this might happen, so let's kind of address this
to avoid it.
Right. Let's address this before it happens.
Yep.
And that's where I think the values of agent buyer's agent comes in.
Sure.
Okay, and that's where I said before that we are more like an advisor to counsel, to our clients, okay? And also to make sure that you're buying the right house that meets your needs and that within your budget. Because buying a home is such a emotional process.
Yep.
Sometimes you walk in, you just love it, and you want to pay everything, a penny you have in your pocket just to get it. So you need a voice of, I would say, a logical voice.
Voice of reason.
Voice of reason,
right,
in that emotional.
Right. Hold on a minute. Have you seen the basement before you make that decision?
Have you seen that? You want to think about, have you seen the railroad track behind the house, for example, right? Yep. So, I think that's where, you gotta have the agent who is able to tell that to you, and not to be afraid to mention that. Okay, right. That's the key. All right, so smart buyings. Okay,
How do you stay one step ahead? Because we said before, it's a somewhat competitive environment. And so you need to stay one step ahead of that competition. Specifically today, I think it's fair to say, given the market we're kind of in.
Right, right. So, so how do we do that? Now, what do the buyers want, right? How do we stay here, right? Couple slides. So, from my experience with the clients I work with, we have, I've seen a couple of groups, two different groups. One that really wants everything that's just kind of turnkey. They want to be able to move in and ready to go. Okay, so the home that's really fresh and upgraded. Of course, many of them wants to have a brand new constructions, but that comes with a certain price tag. So if we don't have that, we can always look to find that's kind of freshly upgraded, and that's really nice. Okay, another group of my buyers that they like the home that they can invest in. It's like they are inspired to be a fixer uppers. Some of them. That they want to kind of put what we call a sweat equity into the home, that they're very handy, okay, and they know how to install the floor or do the paint. I can probably only just paint the wall. That's it.
Home Depot becomes your friend when you know exactly which aisle that thing you need in Home Depot.
Exactly.
Then you're a real fixer-upper.
Yeah, I'm not quite there yet. I can paint the wall, so. But they expect a discount on the home if it's not, totally upgraded. So these are what the buyers are looking today. But if you are into the one that wants the home that are fresh and upgraded, it's gonna be, competition, right? So
that's the whole trick.
So that's what we call the strategy number one, right? So you gotta be very comfortable with that. I've seen a lot of that. I mean, there are many homes that we have come across in this past few months that are very well done, new, fresh, nicely staged, and everybody wants them. About 80%, 90% of people, they're like, we want those homes, right? And it checked out all the boxes on their want to have and nice to have, right? So it becomes very desirable, and that there are competing offers, bidding wars. I've heard a house that has 40 offers.
Yeah, that's right. The other day, yes, 40 offers, 40.
40. I don't know how people manage to read through those offers, and how do you?
But it was definitely a strategy number one house.
Yes,
that's the key. It was one that ticked everybody's.
Right, and that's I think it was a good selling strategy, but it's a tough environment for the buyers, and so we really need to have them pull out all our tricks. In terms of the buyer's agent's expertise, right? So, how do you set a certain strategies to help you win the home? And again, like I mentioned, not just the price that you pay, but also a lot of terms and conditions that you put in, okay? And so that's something that we, with experience, can come in and offer the advice.
Yep.
Okay. And another strategy number two is that, like I say, the other buyers who can recognize potentials in the homes, that others do not see, kind of look through past and look for potentials, but in that case, you gotta really think about location. Like, location is key.
The fundamentals.
The fundamentals are, locations, the floor plan of the home, some of the amenities, and how much space you get for the price. Okay, and a lot of times you have to walk into a home that's really outdated. I think, like a 1950 throwback we've seen with all the wallpaper. So you just have to kind of imagine that it's freshly painted and trying to look through beyond that. And that's a strategy number two that help you to kind of get a home within the price that you have, and then you gotta put some work in.
And I think the one of the key aspects of this in terms of the buyer's agent is, you could go into a home that needs work. Okay, great. But are the fundamentals good?
Right.
Does it have the right flow? Is it a chopped up house? Is it easy to make this the home that you really want?
Right.
And that, I think, is one of the key roles of the buyer's agent, to walk in and go, yes, this home we often say, this home has got good bones.
Right, yeah.
And that's the key. And buyers need to rely, in many cases in this strategy, certainly at the beginning anyway, on the buyer's agent to say, yes, this makes sense, but no, you can't change the location, as you mentioned, Wenjian.
Right.
If it's got a poor location, of that you can't
Yeah,
change.
you can move railroad track. Okay,
Right.
So
It is what it is. You know,
it is what it is.
Yeah. So
yeah.
key to focus on the fundamentals. See past the clutter, but you still got to focus on the fundamentals
exactly.
if you're going to follow this, this strategy.
Right. That's important. And the buyers agents, like we often go out and see homes. I think I counted last year. I saw maybe 300, 400 homes. You know, so I think we've seen enough to kind of able to tell, that's gonna work, and that's gonna cost you a lot of money to move the wall. You know, so that you can create another bathroom. That's gonna cost you a lot more, and that may not be a good strategy to go to. Right.
That's true.
Yeah.
Definitely the case.
Yeah.
Definitely
Exactly.
the case.
So what's next here? Interesting. I always like these slides. So this really I love pictures. It tells you a story. So let's say my buyers, who are in the strategy 1, you walk into this white, beautifully painted kitchen, right? This is the kitchen. These two are identical kitchens, actually. So
They are.
Yeah, and remember this one, yeah. And so for a lot of buyers, they're walking to this, freshly painted, updated kitchen, sort of, and they just wowed, and then they're gonna have it. When you're gonna have it, this is the time where you will have to kind of put up in the competing offer situation. You have to pay more. You pay a premium, for the work that was done. Okay, but if you are someone who can look beyond the clutters, like what you see here,
Yep,
right here. Right there, slide there.
This kind of the wood cabinets.
Yeah, the wood cabinet. So it's identical wood cabinet. It just painted white. So if you can see beyond that, and this is where we call the sweat equity. You come in, you clear it out, and you do the fresh paint and just bring it up to date, and that saves you a lot of money. So
all the only difference between those two pictures is paint.
Paint, yes.
That's only paint.
Yeah.
And this is a buyer seminar. Just remember that if you were talking to a seller, what you would say to a seller, of course, is if you take your existing kitchen, that one on the left, and you paint it and make it the one on the right, it will sell. It will get competing offers. So, but you as a buyer are basically doing it what the seller didn't want to do. The seller decided, I don't want to do anything. I'm going to put it on the market as is. You then, the buyer, can get the value out of that. Oftentimes, of course, the seller does this, and they sell for a premium. So strategy 2 is the seller does this work. What we're talking about here is you, the buyer, doing that work. That's the key.
Well, exactly, because like I say, seller and buyer, selling agent and listing agent and the buyer agent are on the same hand but different side, right? So the seller's agents always want to try to help the sellers,
right?
To get more, which is do some fresh paint, and then you can get competing offers, right? But buyer's agent would say, hey, yes, it looks very nice, but if you're in a competing offer, you have to pay 10%, 14% over the asking price. Is that worth it? Or can you, come in and take a look at the homes that are not so updated or freshly painted, and you can do it yourself, and you can save some money, and that will build the equity.
Right, you can get that 10%.
You can get that 10% or
more,
14% to yourself. That's what I'm trying to say. Yep. And the next slide, of course, very similar strategy, right? A lot of people didn't know that you can actually paint tiles,
Okay.
So it's identical kitchen. I mean, the bathroom, sorry. I was thinking about kitchen. The bathroom, and you just painted everything white, and it looks really nice. Okay. And so that's where I think the moments where the buyer's agents coming to say, hey, you may not want to just pay that extra. Maybe you want to look for a home that you can paint it yourself.
Right. But I don't like the bathroom. That's okay. We can paint the tiles.
Right. You can paint
I don't like
tiles.
pink. Paint them white then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep, exactly.
So, and there's not much changed.
That was it. No, I think in this case it was just painting the tiles.
Painted,
Yeah, just paint.
Right.
Just paint.
Painting, not much money that costs you for paint. So, and the next home is, again, it's just a lot of a picture to show you that what you can do with the identical room. Taking off the carpet, take off the curtains and freshly painted. And voila, here's a beautiful home, beautiful living room. So this is something that you can do, right?
And often what we find is if that carpet perhaps has been down for 20, 30, maybe even 40 years, the hardwood floors underneath are often in very, very good condition.
Right.
So that's kind of, seeing carpet with hardwood underneath is often an indication of a very good floor underneath.
Yes.
Just because it's kind of been protected for the last 30 years.
Yeah, actually, we found that homes that are 30 years, they have really solid wood. Really at that time.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Yep.
much better material at that time,
Right.
right? So another one is as this 1950s basement. I remember.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that picture?
Yeah,
Quite a
so
lot's wrong with that picture, clearly.
nothing wrong. Instead, we just remove the clutters, get things out, and then you repainted it, and guess
That's it.
that's all had to be done. Really,
Repaint
repaint and cleared out the clutter.
and carpet. That's it. Yeah, some
not
carpet
just the
down.
floor.
That's
yeah,
it.
the
Yep,
floor,
that's all
yeah,
was done.
Yeah, and that's all was done. Changing the light fixture a little bit, and that's it. Okay, so that again really is. These are just some of really good examples of what we call sweat equity, right? And how but for people for buyers who want to just have a move-in ready, okay, and be ready. That's a strategy one. Or you pay premium. And in many cases, you go into competing offer situations. But we can help you with that too.
That's right. We can
Yeah,
if you want to do that.
If you want to do that, we're very experienced with that.
That one too.
Yeah. And I remember seeing this one here before. I heard our colleague says it really just a house that needs a haircut. I love that. Right?
So
after COVID-19, 3 months, everybody needs a
We all
haircut.
needed that. We definitely all needed that one. That's for sure.
Right. So this simply, if you look, it's the same house. You just kind of go in and cleared out the landscape and put it down really nice and cleaned up the front door, painted nicely outside, and it looks like a whole different home, but it's actually the same.
Actually, exactly the same.
Yeah,
one.
yeah. So I think the image, the first impression is very important. So
And
so
not to dismiss that house. If you're willing to put the time and energy in, don't dismiss the house on the left because it's relatively straightforward to convert it into a house. In many cases, with good guidance, to convert it into the house on the right.
Right. Okay. Alrighty. So that's kind of the strategy. Search. Finding the needle in the haystack.
Yeah. How do you do that?
All right. To search nowadays, I think a lot of buyers, they say, "Oh, I can just look at the app." There's a lot of apps available.
Right.
Zillow, Redfin. What do you have? Realtor.com.
There must be 50 if you started adding them up.
Yeah.
I suspect.
Yeah, but what I found, I'm getting feedback from my client is that, hey, it says here it's for sale, and then when I look at it on our system, it's already sold. So sometimes the data is inconsistent. So they feel kind of, I'm not getting very accurate data from these apps.
That's true.
So it's important to engage, a buyer's agent. Why? Because we have the system, the multiple listing service, that we use, that we can, help you. We can set you up, in the process. And actually, you said, I think we talk about a couple of things, talk about, your needs, and this is the point where I'm thinking you already have a buyer's agent, you talk to them about your needs and what you want to pay for, not what you can afford, but what you are willing to pay, and then already got your pre-approval, know your budget. And what the agent can do is then we can say, okay, based on what you are telling me, I would recommend some of the towns, and then I will set up the search in our system, and that will give you an update daily. Okay, and sometimes you think that there is a town that you definitely want, but it may not be kind of fall into your price range, if you will. And so we would set up additional towns that kind of help you to compare. Right. I think it's important because especially if you are not familiar with the area, we can help you kind of suggest 1 to 3 towns that kind of fit your needs and fit your criteria. Okay.
The other way I've done this with buyers before is often they will have a very broad range of towns because they don't really understand the towns.
Right.
So sure, why don't we set you up with 8-10 towns? Your job in the first 2 to 3 weeks perhaps is to narrow that number down, because if you start that process in March, there may only be 50 homes in your search.
Right.
By the time we get to May, there'll be 250, and you'll never decide. So use the first few weeks of your search before you do that, go look at the towns. Does that town work for you?
Yeah.
There's big differences between Arlington, for example, and a Concord. You know, a lot of difference between those two. Which type of town are you interested in? So do that, narrow down those number of towns, because as we mentioned earlier,
Right.
everything's at the town level, schools are at the town level.
Right.
So narrow that down. Once you've got it down to a manageable number, at that point, then get serious.
Right, right. Then we start kind of scoping down, right?
Right,
So,
exactly.
But usually when I do that, I would start with, we should go to the next slide actually. You know, when I do the buying consultation meeting with my buyers, I would go and share some data about the town. You know, first of all, you understand your needs and kind of say, all right, you have $700,000 that you like to buy, you know. Maybe you're pre-approved for $1 million, but you only want to spend $700,000, which is great. So let's look at the towns nearby. Okay, if you look at this Arlington, the sales price distribution, this tells us that in Arlington, there's 72 homes in that $700,000 range. So and they're about there's another one in 1.1 million, 1 to 1.5. So you have a higher success rate here in Arlington with the $700,000 home that you can buy, existing home. Okay.
And it's interesting because I'll go back and forth here.
Yeah.
That's Arlington.
Right.
Now let's look at Lexington.
Yeah. So if you look at Lexington,
Big difference.
it's a big difference. Yeah, because if you look at, you have $700,000, you have about 27 homes in a year to choose from.
27 there, 72 there.
Right. I like
Big
that.
difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that gives you if you say, I only want to be in Lexington. Okay, so we only have $700,000 to buy in Lexington. What that means is a lot of times you'll find that you are either in competing offer situation, okay, or these are the homes that you're gonna have to spend some time to bring up to date, okay. So and that's all good if that's what you want to do. If it's gonna take you a while to find the homes that fit your needs in Lexington, that's all kind of this data is sharing with us. Yeah.
The opposite works as well, because you mentioned you have 700,000 to spend.
Right.
There are 72.
Right.
What if you've got 1.5 million to spend? Now I've only got 10 homes that sold in Arlington in 2019.
Yeah.
Whereas if I go to Lexington, that number is 38 existing homes plus 22 new construction.
Right.
So depending on your price point, you can exclude towns that are outside your budget, both low and high. You can both ways work, and you can do this. You can do this without getting away from your computer.
Right.
So sit there and play with the towns.
Yes.
Which towns should I be interested in? Which towns should I not be interested in?
Right. Right.
Or yes, I want Lexington at 700. That's going to be a tough buy because there are so few homes in that price point. You need to add some towns to that. You need to look a little bit further than just one town.
Right.
So you can read a lot. This I like sitting down with buyers, just like you were saying in a consultation, looking at these graphs and say, I definitely want that town. That's going to be a tough one to buy in. Or you're going to be the most expensive home in town. You don't want any of those situations.
Right.
So you can do a lot by just kind of playing around with these graphs, just looking at them and comparing them to your budget.
Right, and that's what we go back to when we talk about is an informed decision process, right? So you're gonna have some data to kind of help you analyze, where to go next, how to proceed with this process, and that's important. So I love this chart. I think this is always the first graph that I go to, and we have, as a data-driven team, we have over 40 towns of data on our website. So, and so that's something that we utilize a lot with our buyers.
Right. All the towns in the area. So it's rare that we don't have data for a town unless you kind of go much further away.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. So next. So now what, right?
The offer.
The offer.
Now we get serious. Okay, now I want to buy that house, Wenjen.
Right.
That is the house I
So
want.
we finally, after the search, high and low, after we narrowed down from 13 towns to 3 towns to 1 town to 1 house, what do we do?
What do we do? Right. How does that process work?
Offer process. I like to say this is more than just offer process. It's offer to closing process. It's a long process. It can go from what 4 to 6 weeks, I think.
Yeah, usually
sometimes.
yes.
Yeah. So initially, when you see the home that you love, these are just the general process steps. Okay, it can changes and varies, depends on the conditions. Depends on the situation.
Right.
But we just kind of go through a general steps that we have to go through. Okay, and this is, I would say, this is very much Massachusetts specific.
It is very much so. Yeah.
You know, other states will be a little bit different. And we'll go to why I mentioned that later. There's a reason why I mentioned that. Okay. So first of all, in here is once you're happy with the home you want to buy, you know, we would talk about the purchase price you want to put in, and we present an offer, and then with the offer we would give $1,000 earnest deposit money. In some cases that may be more if we're in competing offer, and then after that, we would have an inspection about 5 to 10 days. And this inspection is at the point where if you are finding major issues of the home, that you feel uncomfortable, that you want to exit, this is the point where you can exit the contract and you can receive back your initial deposit.
Right.
Okay.
So there's no non-refundable deposits here.
Right. No,
Okay.
there's no non-refundable.
Yep.
And usually the home inspector, you know, depends on the size of your home. I think ranging from $500 to $1,000 maybe, depends on the size. Okay. And we are able to, referral or recommend a few home inspectors that we use, to help you through that process. Okay, and that's now I'm talking about the teams that's going to support you.
Right.
Okay. So
keep part of that team.
Keep part of that team. Okay. That it's important to have experienced inspectors to work with. Okay. And then after you complete with the inspection, you're happy with it, then we move on to purchase and sales. Okay. Purchase and sales usually is about 1 to 3 days after the inspection comes back. And this is where before the purchase and sale happens, you want to kind of have an attorney. This is the attorney state in Massachusetts here. We use attorney to help you write purchase and sales. So this is time where you need to decide on which attorney you want to use. And we also, again, this is another, team member on the team that's going to support you. And we have, a few attorneys that we work with that we're comfortable, knowing that they know what they're doing, and they're real estate attorneys, so that we can recommend as well for you to kind of discuss and which one you want to use. Okay, and at that time you put in during the purchase and sale, we would offer up to not up to, but total of 5% purchase price,
right,
as earnest money minus the initial deposit of $1,000, and that's when you need to put down with your purchase and sales when it's signed, and also the attorney cost actually comes at the end of the closing. And usually the attorney cost is about $500 to $1,500, but that depends if your attorney is representing you along with the mortgage company. I think that also varies. Kind of so it varies, but the attorney will kind of share that with you in the process, in the discussion. And
sometimes that's called purchase and sale is what we use in Massachusetts. I've heard it called attorney review.
Attorney review.
That's the other way. It's in other states it's called that as well. So if you're coming in from another state, purchase and sale is the same as attorney review.
Right, yeah. And in the other states, sometimes they just skip the offer. They went right to the purchase and sale and done by attorney. Yeah, there are states that do that. Okay. And okay, so as soon as the purchase and sale is signed, that's the next day you start submitting mortgage application. And this is the time that you can, while you are signing the purchase and sale, this is time that you can start shop around, for mortgages, right? For different lenders, who can offer you better rate, and then you submit the mortgage application. All right, and normally the mortgage contingency is 4 weeks after you submit the application. What does that mean? That is important. What is that at the mortgage contingency date is that if you are denied of the financing, okay, let's say you're 80% financing, and for some reason you're denied that amount, that's a time that you can exit the contract and get your full 5% earnest deposit back.
Right.
Okay. However, if you get the financing successfully, then you need to move forward, go to closing, and there's no backing out. And if you do choose to back out, then you lose your 5% deposit. Okay. So that's something that's key to remember. And soon after that, after the commitment letter from the bank that you are getting the mortgage, we usually go to closing about 7 to 10 days after that. And that's a time when you need to prepare for the balance of the purchase price, which is, but whatever the bank is ready to loan you, and whatever the balance you need to pay, as your down payment. and plus the closing cost. So,
which I guess is, so doing the numbers, that would be 5% earnest deposit,
right.
perhaps 15% down.
If you are 20% mortgage, if you are 30% mortgage, then you gotta do 25%, right? So it depends on what your mortgage rate is, and then that's a balance you need to bring, and then whatever the bank is willing to loan you.
Right.
So, but that's something that, we will all kind of write it out to help you specifically based on your cases. It'll be different. So no worry, it's over a process that we work with a lot, so we're very familiar.
Yeah, it looks relatively complex, but given that we do it so many times, so often, it does move very smoothly.
Yes.
Usually, when you kind of go through this, there's a few places where it can get some hiccups, but
right.
normally it moves quite quickly. Everybody understands what their role is, and as you said, you've got a team around you, inspectors, attorneys, lenders, and so on.
Exactly. Yeah,
the aim is to get you to closing.
We'll all kind of align, and throughout the process, provide you information what you need to do, what you need to be on the lookout for, and just kind of move you through the process and get to the closing successfully. Okay, so
inspections.
What's wrong? Okay, now I think I always share with my buyers, there is not a home that's perfect. Just like no one is perfect, okay? So every home, not old, but aged or new construction or a home that have been renovated recently, they seem to be all appear perfect, but there are always some issues that will show up. So, be prepared.
Yes. Do not go in, and I guess there's this kind of dichotomy here between the seller thinks their house is perfect.
Lovely.
Of course.
Yes.
The buyer thinks, no, there's quite a lot wrong with it, and that's kind of that's where the strategies kick in to kind of bring those two parties that are not necessarily the two hands, I guess. The two hands
you
again.
See, there's always gap between the fingers, so you can't expect the house to be perfect, right?
Right, exactly. Here we go.
Yeah. So inspection strategies. Now, what this means is that we will, never advise our clients to not do inspection. It's important to do inspection for the home, okay? Now, they are in a situation where when we're in a competing offer situation, that they are, some buyers willing to waive inspections, okay? And so these are a few things that I need to be careful, okay? So the traditional process is always have the inspection. And at this time, the sellers absorbs risk because they're concerned that if you find some issues that you do not want to proceed with the purchase, the house can go back on the market. Okay. And during the competing offer situation time, the sellers do not want to have the risk of their home go back on the market because that kind of lose that particular the home that they could sell for.
So the first weekend excitement, perhaps, one way to describe it, yeah.
Exactly. And another approach is that you waive inspection, which I mentioned before. Some buyers who, want to buy the home to the point where they say, I'm just going to forego inspection. Now, this is very risky, but the sellers love it because you go right to purchase and sell within 3 days. Okay, and that secure that purchase and that buyers, lock in the buyers. But that in that case, I would say, I would advise my buyers to say, we can do a pre-offer inspection if you really want to be competing with others. And what that means is that before we submit an offer, we get an inspector. We go in and we do our inspection, and then understand the issues that you may find in the home, and that you feel comfortable with. Then we go in with an offer, and then we can waive the inspection. Okay, that's something that we will make sure that I think it's better for the buyer in that case, so you don't risk once you go into the home and finding some problems that you don't see. Okay, all right, that's important. And another way to do that would be during the inspection that we could increase what we call the inspection contingency deduction. And what that means is that we could offer on the terms to the seller, say, we would like to have the inspection, but we will cover up to, for example, $10,000 of repairs if, anything found in the inspection. or any other amount that you're willing to negotiate.
Right.
And in that case, that it's a shared risk between among the sellers and the buyers. And that's something that if you did not have time to do a pre-offer inspection, or if you didn't want to spend the money to do pre-offer inspection before you know your offer will be accepted, that's another option that we would offer.
And I guess depending on the house, you might recommend any of those strategies. I was just thinking today,
Yeah.
Corinne on our team is doing an inspection
Right.
on a house that was built in 1780.
Yeah.
Who knows what they may find nothing, of course.
Right.
But that's probably, if that was the home, then you would recommend request the inspection.
Yeah.
If on the other hand you're doing new construction, then it would be a different strategy. So depending on the home,
Yeah.
the buyer's agent will be able to say which is the right strategy.
Right.
Would you favor a more risky strategy because it's a home that's beautifully cared for, or if it's perhaps an older home, maybe go with a less risky strategy of doing a normal inspection after you've got an accepted offer. So
Exactly.
it kind of would vary between those.
Yeah, so we really, the good thing is that we have strategies that we can kind of tailor to the to the
Right.
situation that
Whichever
we're
one
running
kind of
into.
works.
Yeah. Okay.
So I've got that out of the way.
Oh, now I say the process is long. So inspection now is financing. Okay, all right. Who is picking up the tab? Okay.
Right.
So the financing, this is a very long one.
No, it's pretty straightforward. The key piece of this, I think, which many buyers don't understand as they go into this process,
Right.
is really the second point there, and this is kind of important at the
it
moment.
is, and I think it's very important that when you as you are talking to the lender, have a conversation, understand how the mortgage is is approved, and in the case here, when it comes to the offer situation, that when you are able to offer higher down payment, let's say a 30% down payment, with a mortgage of 70%, versus someone who comes in with a 20% and an 80% mortgage, the higher down payment itself presents a stronger offer. This is the key.
That's the first thing, right?
That's the first
Absolutely.
thing. Yeah, that's what we call by understanding and financing. Okay, so that you show that you have a lot more down payment that you are able to afford this home. So meaning you will have a higher success rate of getting that mortgage commitment from the bank.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one of the key to kind of have that in mind. And another one is about the home value is determined by appraisal, not by sales price.
Right.
Okay. This is important to understand, especially during the competing offer situation, when there are homes that here that could sell 10% over asking price, which could be 10% over the fair market value. And what that's important is that appraiser comes and they do a comp on the home, with the home that in the area, and give you the value of this home. Now, if this purchase is appraised at a lower than the sales price that you put in, you may need to increase your down payment.
Yep.
For
Make
example,
up the difference.
Make
right?
up the difference.
Yep.
Okay, so that's something that you're gonna remember. That it's important to put that in your conversation as you are planning your budget and your finance. Okay, in case of that is why you don't buy a home that's all the way up to your pre-approval, right? So you kind of really have a little budget or a little space where you can work with in case of competing offer situation. All right, and then they will also the lender will discuss with you about your incomes and your assets and your credit score and then the whole package to give you.
And don't buy that fancy card after you've got an accepted offer.
Yeah, because you're going through the approval process, so make sure that you don't go buy
the fancy card. That's always the advice we give the buyers.
60,000, 80,000 fancy card, woo-hoo, and
Don't
then
do that.
that's gonna ruin your score credit, and it's gonna lower your income assets ratio and expenses ratio. So that's gonna affect how much you can get the mortgage.
You don't want to upset anything as you're in this process.
Right.
I've got approval. Let's get through the whole mortgage process and do closing. At that point.
Right. Once you get the home, when you finish closing, go buy that house.
You can buy whatever you want at that point.
Yeah, go buy that car.
Go buy whatever you want at that point.
Exactly. Okay.
And one question we often get is around closing costs. Because how big are they? Because what I found,
Yeah.
they vary by state.
Right.
Danny
yeah.
and I originally bought in Maryland,
Yeah.
and closing costs are very, very high there.
Right.
Whereas they vary, say county to county, but also state to state.
Right. Yeah. So there's I know that there's a like the closing cost calculator, online. I would just suggest you based on it kind of give you the where are you buying, what are you buying, the sale price, and then they kind of give you an estimate.
An order of magnitude, anyway,
Yeah,
so you can get a sense of that. Because as you were saying before, don't buy up to your budget,
Right.
because you need a little bit of breathing space. Perhaps the appraisal comes in a little bit low,
Right, yeah.
and you've got to factor in those closing costs,
Right.
title insurance, homeowners insurance, all of that,
Yeah.
which may well be escrowed. So don't go up. Give yourself some breathing space, because there are some additional costs. They're not that high in general in comparison to other states, but certainly something to get a handle on before you kind of start this whole process, so you know exactly
Yeah.
what those numbers are actually going to be for you.
Right.
That's key.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes the attorney can give you a rough idea of how much.
Sure. Yeah, that or the lender. I mean, one of them just kind of asked around. There are these calculators online that does give you an order of magnitude anyway.
Right.
You'll know if it's $5,000 or $10,000
Right. Yeah.
based on where you are, house price and so
right,
on.
house price.
It'll give you a sense of that.
Exactly. Okay.
Last member of our team.
Yes,
Our
our
attorney.
team attorney.
Because Massachusetts is an attorney state.
Yes.
You can't just do it yourself.
No.
And some states you can. I've never been in a state that you can. Although sometimes they call them an escrow agent as opposed to an attorney.
The closing is done by the escrow title company.
Right. I think Maryland's like that too,
Yeah,
actually.
right.
We have an attorney and it's done by.
Right.
And when you look at $1 million listing, whatever, Danny loves that. I'm not a big fan, but there. It all seems to be go into escrow, and that's not a term that we use here.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it
In
is,
other states, they have the agent and then the escrow company.
right,
The
yeah.
title
So
agent company.
we don't have that here. It is literally all done by an attorney.
Right.
That's kind of
Yeah. So like we just mentioned, the attorney is required to buy or sell house here. Buyer has two attorneys, right? They represent the buyers and represent the bank. But a lot of attorneys that we use can represent both the buyers and the bank, and which in a way that kind of lower your cost.
That makes it simpler, if nothing.
Makes it
Otherwise,
simpler.
you have somebody else in the mix.
Right. And I think I
Right.
mentioned before that part of the team, it's important that you use a real estate attorney, because the real estate attorney, they've done so much transactions, so they know, what are in the process, what are the forms, the regulations, the local zone, and insurance needs, etc. So it's important to use a real estate attorney who knows what they're doing. And they would also help you to advise you on how you hold the property on the deeds.
Yep. All those questions,
there are
right?
different ways. Yeah. And so again, with lenders, we have a list of attorneys that we work with a lot, and that we can, recommend. I think one of the experience we had was someone who wanted to use attorney from out of state that have no idea what's going on in Massachusetts. It's like, oh, okay.
Seen that? Yes, we've seen that a few times. Same with non-real estate attorneys too.
Right.
So we would definitely recommend a real estate attorney just because they know the process.
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
it's not. If you do it often enough, then it's not that complex. But if you do it very rarely, there's a lot of moving parts,
Right.
and we find that buyers, if they don't choose a real estate attorney, there's missing pieces. The timing is off.
Yeah.
There's usually last minute things that go wrong.
Yeah.
So we would always recommend that you
Right.
you go with a real estate
And
attorney.
the analogy I would put down is like if you let's say if you get on the bus, right, to Cambridge, right, you want to get on the right bus with the right driver. So you want
There you go.
not the attorney.
Otherwise you can go. Who knows
Either you
where.
go to the left or go to the right, right? So
Right,
you
yeah.
want to get on the bus with the right people driving, and with the people on the same team and go on the same directions.
Yep.
Otherwise, your whole process is just going,
Yeah, and it can quickly go.
quicker go
off in
south.
left
yeah,
field as well, yeah,
Exactly.
definitely,
Yeah. So
definitely.
attorney is a very important part of this
And the
process.
whole process,
Yeah.
yep.
Exactly.
So
Bye.
how is this changing? That was great. Thanks, Wendy and Marcus. But what about this year? What kind of happened in 2020? And it's kind of many. If anybody's watched any of our talks before, you've seen this graph before because it was different this year. Open houses, for example.
Yeah. So different. Yeah. It's very challenging. virtual open houses, you know, how open houses that's timed, you know, you got 5 minutes and you gotta get out, you know, and you gotta queue up. It's a very different process. Yeah.
So luckily, you know, that was kind of April, parts of May. Now it's beginning to kind of open up. We called this phase buyer confidence returns, and it is returned. You know, that we definitely has. But we are beginning to open up. But as you mentioned about open houses, the traditional route that a buyer would take would be to go to open houses.
Yeah.
That's problematic because if it's a popular home, there could be a big queue outside the open house, and we've definitely seen that. So really don't expect that open house to be the way you expected before. You could turn up, you could walk around. We were talking the other day about the home we did the open house at 5 Constitution here in Lexington, where we had 100 plus groups through the open house in those 2 days.
Yeah.
It was
I know.
those days. Maybe it's good those days have gone, but
Right.
that's definitely not the situation we find ourselves today.
Right.
It is much more controlled in terms of those open houses, and many buyers relying on virtual showings to look at those homes before they do that private showing.
Yeah.
That's it has changed a little bit.
Right.
So how do you do it? Well, restricted showings. Many times will prevent. Winchester, for example, next time over was preventing showings of occupied homes. I had the situation where a buyer's agent didn't want to accompany their showings, so I went and let them in the house. The buyer's agent didn't want to.
Yeah.
We always talk about your scary situation of where they were. Wendy went and it should be empty.
Yeah. Yeah, it was supposed to be unoccupied. You walk in, every room was people. It's like, what? Let's get out of here.
Right. So it's scary, but as you did in that time, okay, we can always just walk away.
Right.
We can always just walk away.
Right. Exactly.
But and less and less, I think many people are now, you know, aware of the situation more than they were previously. This was kind of early on in COVID. Now I just fancy more and more people are aware. Certainly our sellers, many of them are going away for the weekend. They just want to be out of the house, certainly if the home's going to be popular in terms of the number of showings.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just go away. Let's just let it all happen. And then I don't have to worry.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. So, and you know, a range of different options. Sometimes you do things virtual. I think the way it seems to be playing out, you know, what you found, Wen-Jen, is that buyers will do a lot of virtual. They'll let their fingers do the walking. As used to be an advert in the UK called "Let Your Fingers Do the Walking."
Yeah.
They would do it all virtual.
Right.
And then they would take the 10 homes they liked the look of, get it down to 3 or 4, and then say these are the 3 or 4 I want to do a private
buyers
showing.
are much more selective now. You know, in the past, you just kind of on weekend, nothing to do, go check out homes. Right, now, there's more. You know, if there are 3D tour pictures to look at, unfortunately, some will have like 6 pictures, and so those homes are gonna, you know, not have a lot of buyers look at, and so they look at where you and drive around the town and look at 3D tour, and then say, okay, this is something that I really want to go in. Then we schedule private showing to go in.
Right.
Yeah.
That,
much safer.
And I think that's going to continue probably through the rest of the year. I don't know it's going to change significantly between now through the end of the year.
Right.
You know, there is no. It doesn't seem that anything can change sufficiently that will get back to the old ways. So get used to that kind of virtual showing and then restricted private showings.
Right.
But again, as you said, maybe a short period of time that you're allowed in, maybe a 10 or 15 minute window.
Right. Yeah. 15 minutes. You know, if it's a big home. Yeah.
Yeah. So it can be quite kind of tough to do that. Less accessibility than we had previously.
Right.
This was the one that I found quite limiting because I was restricted inspections with some inspectors not allowing buyers to attend. I had one where the first home they went to, the inspector would only allow one of the people to go in with them, one of the buyers to go with them. Second time it was 2 of them. We managed to negotiate 2 of them going in.
Right.
That I think you miss a lot of the nuances about the house. The inspector's there to find issues with the home, but I also think there's a lot other things they point out.
Right.
I always mention changing the filters in the air conditioning unit.
Right.
For example.
Right. How to operate a home, you know, what to look out for, and those are very important knowledge, you know. And
you miss a lot of that with these kind of restricted inspections. because you get limited access to that home. I mean, that's the real challenge. And when Jen's talked about this extended team, you really have to have confidence in that extended team, more so this year than previously, just because the amount of accessibility to that home is limited. You know, the buyer agent is there to say, you know, yes or no, this is a good house or not.
Right.
You're going to get limited access for the inspector and so on. So I do think you need to rely more this year than in previous years on that extended team.
Very much, yeah.
And then financing. The one, you know, banks tightening a little bit. The one I think which is the issue, and we've seen it actually twice this week, yes, was appraisals as when Jen mentioned you can only borrow based on the appraised value, not your offer value. We've had the situation where because appraisers are not going into the homes, they're doing a so-called drive-by or a desk appraisal.
Right.
There is that potential for lower appraisals, and so I think just as you were saying, think about giving yourself a little bit of breathing space depending on your pre-approval, just in case the situation arises this year. We haven't seen low appraisals for a number of years, but
that's a tricky one because you know different homes, you know, inside different upgrades. So you know, for appraisers not going in to see what's in there, it often come back just based on the number of bathrooms and bedrooms and give a lower appraisal, and so that's a bit challenging.
Yeah, I think it is. So you know, give yourself a little bit of breathing space between pre-approval and the offer that you're actually making, just because you may need that extra headroom, if you like, to actually to get over some of these issues that are appearing just this year. So we haven't seen low appraisals for a number of years. Certainly here in Lexington, Arlington, these towns where appraisers realized that they were hot towns, very popular towns, were able to get in to see how a home was presented, and we found very rarely we found low appraisals, but I think they say that potential arises even here in Lexington and Arlington this year.
Yep.
Almost there.
Almost
there. So I guess this is how you get used to the new normal. I guess I'm not sure I like the word the new normal, but virtual consultation. I like the virtual consultation. I don't know about you.
I do. Yeah, we run through. You know, with my buyers, we would get on the Zoom meeting. You know, look at the map. You know, look at the home they like, and just kind of go through. You know, just on the Google map. Oh, this is where you are. This is where you're gonna commute to. You wanna do 1.5 hour commute, you know, so it's very, I think digital information is very important. So at least we kind of go through, and then we can click through on our system, look at the homes, and just kind of look at the pictures. And a lot of time from the photos, we could tell the condition of the homes, you know, and then we go through the 3D tour, just kind of, how about, I think you're missing this, you know, this flow is not that great. If you want to have an extra bathroom, can really build here. So you kind of have that understanding before you even go into the home. So it's really helpful.
So I did a number of Zoom-based consultations with buyers as well. I also found it, while you're sitting down opposite somebody, you know, it's difficult. Well, why don't I show you this? But on a Zoom call, you can just flip to another tab on a browser. Hey, let's look at Google Maps. Look how close you are to I-90. Oh, I didn't realize. You know, let's look at the stats for this town. You know, is it the most? So you can flip between lots and lots of information very easily. And given that everybody is now au fait with Zoom, which they were, I guess we weren't quite previously, but now everybody understands it because that's their world. Everybody's like, we'll just jump on a Zoom call and do this. And I found it very easy.
Very easy. I like it. You know, and it saves time too. You don't have to find time to meet, you know, try to go to the office somewhere. You just kind of say, okay, you know, 2 o'clock, let's get on Zoom, and then we can just go through and look at some homes. You know, that's really nice.
And you mentioned the digital marketing piece. I mean, there's a larger number of homes. As listing agents, we always produce 3D tours, for example, but that wasn't the case. We've seen more this year than previously. I have an inkling that will decline as we kind of get back to this new normal, as we kind of end in 2020, but get used to looking at all those digital marketing pieces to see how it all works. Electronic signatures we've been doing a lot of. That's kind of an easy one. The one I do think we lose a lot though is that hands-off inspection.
I think we still need to go back eventually to that inspection in person, you know, because just looking at through the iPhone or the, it's just not easy to see, the details. And sometimes you lose a signal down in the basement, and then you have to record it.
Right, and it's after the fact, it's like, you can't ask questions.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
yeah.
So inspection really, I think, it has to go back to kind of in person.
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it will. I mean, that's what the inspectors want as well. At the end of the day,
Right. Yeah.
They want that. They want that interaction with buyers. That's key.
Yeah.
We're beginning to roll out a buying dashboard, so you know exactly the state of your transaction. That's coming. We want people to have very convenient access to all the key dates, all the key information that's going on. Mm-hmm. We're about to roll that out for ourselves. We have one already today, but it's web-based. We're going to go with an app-based one, so that will happen. Get used to restricted showings, as you were saying, around time, if nothing else. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one question we often get is, can we do everything, e-record everything? And we can, just about. We can e-record at the registry, so we can still do this process all the way through. And even some of the restrictions we had, for example, on smoke detectors, mm-hmm. The fire department wasn't reviewing smoke detectors, which is something a seller needs to have before they can sell the home. That restriction's being lifted too. Mm-hmm. So more and more as we move forward. So the restrictions we had, which was adding another layer of complexity to it, actually are beginning to be lifted. So we are slowly but surely getting back to very much the situation we had previously. So virtual home buying today, a little bit less virtual home buying tomorrow, but still there's a lot of components here which I hope will stay around that virtual consultation.
It's going to be a little bit hybrid, I think. It just actually kind of help us to move toward using more technology, mm-hmm. with the pre-work, like pre-scoping work, kind of look at the homes you really want to go in to see that home and be serious about it, and then we actually go visit a home site. Yep. So I think that's really nice.
So, what is our commitment to the buyer, Wenjin?
Well, I think I mentioned, before, we are, part of the team. I think a very important team that's gonna be there to support you, mm-hmm. To give you advice and share a lot of experiences and knowledge that really only get when you're out in the field a lot, like seeing a lot of homes and work with a lot of transactions, right? And then offer you suggestion and recommend you to other team members, mm-hmm. So we can all get on the same bus and go to the same place, right?
Right. You go to Cambridge as opposed to somewhere else.
Yeah, instead of going, kind of get you to where you want to go.
Sure.
Smoothly, so kind of reduce the potholes along the way, or drive off to the cliff, just kidding. Yep. So, and really kind of help you kind of go through, understand your needs, really important. It's really listen to what you're looking for, understand your needs, and trying to help you find a home that fits your needs and also within your budget. And sometimes maybe say, hey, this is not really what you want to say you want to pay. Maybe you want to look at, mm-hmm. take a breather, go home, think about it, and go from there. And of course, arranging showings, of course. And of course, and the most important thing is ability to offer you strategies, how to best go in and with your offer, with your terms and conditions, and negotiate for you, and walk through the inspection with you, mm-hmm. and eventually go to the smooth closing process,
which is what everybody wants to do.
Yes, so we're on the home purchasing process bus with you, right? So that's our commitment, and I think that it's a personal commitment.
Sure.
It's I take that very seriously. So it's a lot of my clients becomes my friends. So
a relationship as opposed to a transaction, just we mentioned before.
Right. So it's a long-term relationship. So that's very important. Yeah. Time to talk about me. So that's right.
About you, about them, about the buyers. So that was great, Wenjin. Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
That was great.
Thank you.
If you need to reach out to Wenjin, here's Wenjin's details. Buyer's agent and listing agent on our team. So that was really insightful, and I think gave potential buyers a great insight into that whole, what looks like a pretty scary process, mm-hmm. but actually when you break it down the way you did, then it kind of isn't as scary as perhaps they think.
Right.
Especially with I love the way you describe the team.
Yeah.
You know, it's the buyer's agent, the attorney, the inspector, it's the financing, that kind of team
Right.
that gets you in the right place. So.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, you're right. It's a big process, you know, it's a big process, and for a lot of people, first time or haven't done it in a long time, you know, let's say last time you did it was 10 years ago,
Right.
how are you going to do it now? And you know, it's a team of people that's going to be here to support you, you know, and to help you, to guide you through the process, you know. So we're very experienced, you know, group of people here. And we're data driven because we got all the information.
We got all the data you could ever want about
Yeah,
this
we
whole
don't just
thing.
pull a number off the and say, yeah, that's how much you have to pay.
I can show you all the data. That's
Yeah,
for
we
sure.
can show. I think an information, a decision based on data, it's, you know, it's an informed decision.
It gives people confidence too that they've made the right decision.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, once you say, yeah, I understand why I've got to pay X for a home, I get
Right,
that, and
And this is the biggest investment
they will
you know,
ever
for
make.
most people.
Indeed,
Right.
certainly the biggest investment I've ever made. Anyway,
Right.
that's
Exactly.
for sure.
Right. So okay. Well.
Perfect. Thank you,
very
Wenjen.
much,
That was
Marcus.
great.
Thanks for
And
having
if
me.
you anytime you want to talk to Wenjen, her number is here. So
I'm
with
only
that,
one phone away.
with that, we'll say goodbye and thank you for listening.
Good night.
Bye.